Okay, so today we'll learn how to create glows, flares, highlights, and shadows in Photoshop. So there are three different ways we are going to do it. The last one is a special method that I call layer mask shortcut. So I'll show you how to do it with the exposure adjustment layer and solid color and the brush tool. So these are three different ways you can achieve that. I know you've been seeing that on some fancy YouTube thumbnails. So today we are going to create that inside of Photoshop. So I have this image here already. I downloaded it from Vecteezy, so it's a free image. What we are going to do is we want to create that split glow effect that has one color on this side and one color on this other side. So you're going to pick any complementary color of your choice. Blue and red goes together, blue and pink, magenta and cyan, any color that works for you. So you just give it that split color effect. So what we are going to work with is what color are we going to use now? We're going to use blue and pink and see how that goes. So let's say I make this image black and white. So I think I want it in black and white. You can leave your own as a colored image. It doesn't affect it in any way. I just want you to see the effect of the colors we are going to put on this. So let's go straight. Now, the first method I'm going to show you is using exposure. So that's the first method. So I'll turn off my black and white filter. We don't need that for this method. So using the exposure adjustment layer, you add exposure, no, not curves. You come down here and you add exposure. So now once you check your properties panel, I rearrange my workspace like this. So wherever your properties panel is, you can just go there straight and make the necessary adjustment. So what we are going to do is to use this layer as a clipping mask, and then you can just right click and go to create clipping mask. There's a shortcut for that. You just hold Alt and put your mouse in between both layers and you can quickly create a clipping mask. So what we are going to do is to increase the exposure to the amount that we want. Do you get? So using exposure does not really allow you add more colors. It's just white or some form of brightness, you get. So you invert the mask with Control I. Ensure that the mask is selected, not the thumbnail, the mask, and you do Control I, and it's going to invert that for you. So now we'll have to use the brush tool, although we are coming to the third method, which is strictly dedicated to the brush tool. So you can right click, ensure that your hardness is 0. You can adjust your brush size, and then ensure your foreground color is white. So you can just come here and maybe increase the edge glow. So you just paint over the edges with the exposure layer mask selected. So that's what you just have to do. So once you paint over those edges, you see that it glows up. Do you get? Let's go to the hair. You can do the same for the hair. So the background I'm currently using may not really complement these changes we are making, but that's just for the purpose of this tutorial. So ensure that your background matches whatever you're creating. So now this is before and this is after. Do you get? So this is before and this is after. So this is step 1, or let's say method 1, using exposure. That's if you just want an increase in brightness. Do you understand? But if you want to have colors, let's use the second method, which is solid color. So now you can have a solid color layer. You come here, you go to solid color. Which one are we going to use now? Let's use blue. So now, just like before, you also create a clipping mask. So you right click and go to create clipping mask. So now this has totally covered our image. Let's see if we can adjust the colors to something that will fit perfectly. Okay, let's work with this. I don't know what they call this, lemon green or whatever, but let's work with this. So you select the mask as we did for the exposure layer and you invert it with Ctrl I. Now the same method, your brush tool selected. Now what you have to ensure is that these layers, their blend mode should be screen. I didn't emphasize it for this one, but ensure the blend mode is screen to give you a better glow effect. You see that when it was in normal, you can see the difference versus when it is in screen, it's brighter. So you can use any of these brightness color modes, but preferably screen. So this is in screen blend mode and this is in normal blend mode. So this screen blend mode gives you more brightness. You get, so always ensure that these layers are in the screen blend mode. So we are done with the exposure method. So this is the second method using solid color layers. So like I said, you add your solid color and then use a clipping mask and clip it to your original image. Then when your mask is white, which is the default mask that comes with solid colors, ensure that you invert it. You select the mask and do Ctrl I to invert the mask. That is very simple. So just as we did, your brush tool selected, foreground color is white. You can now repeat the same process. So you can do this with different colors. So let's say we want this to be like this. So let's use another solid color. Now change the blend mode to screen. Do not forget that. Now let's use another complementary solid color. So you have to get used to the color wheel to understand colors that actually complement each other. Do you get? So let's use red for this one. And then like before, right click, create clipping mask. You can see that the shortcut is there, Alt Ctrl G. So whichever shortcut you prefer to use. Select the white layer mask and make it black. Just do Ctrl I on your keyboard and it turns to black. Now your brush tool selected, foreground color is white, blend mode screen, layer mask selected, just come to here and you paint over the subject or whatever you're using. Do you understand? So this is just how it works. You can also use gradients, but that is not for this tutorial. There is a different purpose for that. Although you can use gradients if it works for you, but basically these are the things you need to do. Whatever you're doing, if it's a solid color or the exposure adjustment layer you prefer to use, first things first, create your exposure adjustment layer or your solid color layer or your gradient layer, and then the next thing you have to do is invert the layer mask. The layer mask has to be black, just like these ones, so that when you paint with white using the brush tool, it reveals only that part of the color. And also ensure that whatever layer you're using, whether the solid color or the exposure layer, it's clipped to your actual image. Do you understand? So now let's go to the third method. So some group of persons prefer this method where you don't really have to create any special adjustment layer or solid color layer or gradient layer. What you have to do is just create a blank layer. See this icon here? You can use this icon to create a blank layer, or you go to layer, new layer, whichever process works for you. So I did this and it's automatically clipped to the image because it was under the other layers that were clipped to the image. So if yours isn't, ensure that you always clip it to the image. So straight to your brush tool, it's a blank layer, so it doesn't really have any effect. So you can be precise with this if you're using this brush tool. So you can just go to the edges, ensure it's screen blend mode like I said. So you can just try to be as detailed as you need to be. So those things is wearing a yellow colored shirt. Let me turn this to the black and white. Let's really see the effect. This is just to show you the effect. There is nothing special about it. If you prefer using colored images or black and white images, it's 100% up to you. So you can scale this up. Now I'm using a shortcut for increasing the size of my brush. If you've noticed, if you're using an external mouse, you hold Alt on your keyboard and you right click and drag. It's going to, they call it I think it's a scrub zoom or whatever they call it, or you can also use the bracket keys on your keyboard, or you right click and manually adjust the size, anyone that works for you. So you can change the brush color at any point in time. That is one advantage of using this method. So the advantage of this method over the other ones is, let's say if you want to have multiple colors as the highlights, they call it highlight and shadows. So what we are doing basically is creating highlights to reflect some light effects. Let's say if in real life you have some lights in your background, let's say you're trying to create content and you have this light behind you, they call it a backlight or a rim light. So it's going to create this rim light effect around the subject. Do you get? So that is what it is. So you can change the color at any point. If you're using this method, you can change the color at any point. If you want to use green at some point or blue, you can just change it and then you're good to go. So, but the best practice is to always use complementary colors. For instance, now look at this blue and red. It matches very well. So if that is what works, you can just come change it to blue and have the other side as red. Do you understand? So with that covered, now there is a simple method, the shortcut method, that I'll call the layer mask shortcut. It works with any of these methods I have explained. Do you understand? It works with any of these methods, whether you're using the exposure adjustment layer or a solid color layer or a gradient layer or a brush tool on an empty layer. It still works. So here is how it happens. Let's use a solid color. I'll delete these other layers so that we don't get confused. Now I'm leaving my image as black and white so that you can really notice the colors. There's nothing special about keeping it in black and white. You can use your colored images, but I just really want you to notice the colors. Do you understand? So now what we are going to do is to ensure that we select the pixels of this our image. So what you can do is right click on the thumbnail and go to select pixels. There's a shortcut for that. You can just hold Ctrl on your keyboard and click the thumbnail and it will select the pixels. Do you understand? So once we have that, we'll now use this to create a clipping mask. Now let's do this. So we'll select a solid color. Let's use this guy. So now you click OK. It automatically creates this mask. But now we would still clip it to this image like before. So right click, create clipping mask, and then blend mode screen. You can now see it's taking effect. So invert the mask with Ctrl I. So what we are going to do here now is that this time we are not going to use a brush tool. It's not going to be the main thing. So you just come to your properties panel with the layer mask of the solid color layer selected, whether it's an exposure adjustment layer, any type of layer you want to use. You select the mask and you come here and you increase the feather. Once you increase the feather, it starts creating this edge rim light for you. You get, does it based on the feathering of this mask. You get, so it's basically softening the edge of the solid color layer mask. I don't know if you understand it. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments and I'll explain. Do you understand? So you can increase it depending on how you want it to be. Do you get? So that's just it. So this seems to be the simplest way to do it. Now let's try it with the exposure adjustment layer so that you can see it again. So you select pixels of your image layer, right click on the thumbnail, select pixels, you come here, add your exposure adjustment layer, ensure it is clipped. So once you increase the exposure, you can see what is happening. Now ensure blend mode is screen. Do not forget that. Invert the mask. Ctrl I. So once you increase the feather, if you look at the edges now, you can now see what is happening. This was before and this is after. Do you get? So this was before and after, before and after. So you can now see. Now that is the shortest way of doing that if you don't want to use the brush tool, depending on the particular situation you are. If you want to use this method for a split color effect, you might have to still fall back to your brush tool to like erase this other part. So that means your foreground color has to be black because black conceals and white reveals. So you just have to cover these other places and then repeat it with the other type of color and then erase the other part for the other color. It's very simple to understand. So now the final one, just as you see in most YouTube thumbnails, they usually use this lens flare effect. You can download one, lens flare overlay, or you can create one yourself. I have a bunch of them. So if you go to, I have some of them here. So if you place it like this and you change the blend mode to screen, you can now see you're having this lens flare effect. Do you get? So once you change it to screen, now you can see that the background isn't really complementing it, but that's just for the purpose of this tutorial. When you have a good background, you can also clip this, make this a clipping mask and still use it for similar purpose. Do you get? So you can now see, you can still use this as a clipping mask, or if you don't have one and you want to create your own, just create a blank adjustment, a blank layer, a new layer, a blank layer. So you select your brush tool, right click, ensure the hardness is 0. You can increase the size of the brush, and then maybe you just click once. Now let's use this other color that we used before. So you can just click once and then come to the center, because the center has to be brighter to simulate a light source. So you can increase the brightness maybe towards white or even pure white, but I don't like using pure white. So you can just hit it at the center to make it look realistic. You can just hit it at the center. And now once you've done that, change the blend mode to screen and it works. You can do that for any color of your choice. Do you understand? So you can still use this you can clip this to your image and do whatever you want to do with it. Do you understand? So it's that simple. So the 3 methods I showed you was the exposure, the solid color, and the brush method. You get. So all these methods work with each other. You can mix them at some point in time depending on what you really want to achieve. Do you understand? So, but these are the different ways you can achieve this, and that's simple. And if you have any question, you can let me know in the comment section and I'll attend to that straight. And then if you need the assets I used for this tutorial, you'll find a link to download it in the description, so you can try it out for yourself. And I'm also going to save this PSD file and add it to the assets so you can download it and see the exact process I used. You understand? And then I think somebody created this whole thing as an action, but I've not really put attention in that aspect. So I'm going to do that after this tutorial. So if it's possible to create a good action that will make this easy to achieve. Do you get? So just remember, if you're using this layer mask method, you just have to adjust the feather on the edges of this image. So you can use the brush or use exposure, whichever one works for you. It's that simple.